Today we're going to have a look at a SolasCPC video that asks whether or not atheists can be good. Let's see what they have to say.
Can you be good without God?
Yep.
That is one of the most explosive questions I think that can be asked whenever people who believe in God and those who don't discuss. Why? Because people have many, many different ways, I think, of misunderstanding the question.
And because it's often used as a bludgeon against atheists. Religious people will often insinuate we're either not able to be good people, or that our moral frameworks are just constructed using chance and preference, rather than reasoning and empathy.
What do you think of, in fact, when you hear the question, can I be good without God? Some people hear that question to be implying that if you don't believe in God, you can't be a good person. And it's taken to imply that atheists can't give money to charity, help poor people, help old ladies across the road, rescue kittens from trees. And that's to misunderstand the question, because I think, of course, you can do good deeds without being a believer in God.
I'm guessing that's not the end of the video, Andy. You just admitted atheists are capable of doing the same things as a religious person, so I'm not sure why we need religion.
But here's the thing I want you to think about. Why are those things good?
Well, there are all sorts of components to that question. I'm thinking it has a lot to do with suffering, empathy, evolution, and our propensity to be social creatures, trying to construct flourishing communities with the least amount of suffering possible, and so forth. I think it's a complex question and one worth exploring, but I don't think the answer is God said it is so, so it must be so.
Why is it good to give to the poor? Why is it good to help others? Why is it good to be altruistic or to care for creation? What makes those things good?
I'm going to play a clip from a TED Talk that featured Sam Harris. It's a few minutes long, so I'm sorry for the length, but I think it really demonstrates how moral reasoning can take place. In the first part of the talk, he says that we're more concerned with the well-being of primates than insects or rocks because we believe that primates can experience more suffering than a rock or an insect. He then goes on to explore how we can use this knowledge to map out a moral landscape, where there are peaks and valleys in human flourishing. Some of those peaks may be identical to another, but we got to that peak of flourishing by using a different path. In other words, there isn't necessarily a best answer to any moral question, because there may be many that would accomplish the same level of flourishing. Anyways, I urge you to watch the entire talk. It's very interesting, and I'll link it in the description below. So here's what Sam had to say about an example he used on how to map this moral landscape when considering the female body.
Now this brings us to the sorts of moves that people are apt to make in the moral sphere. Okay? Consider the great problem of women's bodies. What to do about them? Well, this is one thing you can do about them. You can cover them up. Now it is the position, generally speaking, of our intellectual community that, while we might not like this, we might think of this as wrong in Boston or Palo Alto. Who are we to say that the proud denizens of an ancient culture are wrong to force their wives and daughters to live in cloth bags? I mean, who are we to say even that they're wrong to beat them with lengths of steel cable or throw battery acid in their faces if they decline the privilege of being smothered in this way? Okay, well, who are we not to say this? Who are we to pretend that we know so little about human well-being that we have to be non-judgmental about a practice like this? I'm not talking about voluntary wearing of a veil. I mean, women should be able to wear whatever they want, as far as I'm concerned. But what does voluntary mean in a community where, when a girl gets raped, her father's first impulse, rather often, is to murder her out of shame? Just let that fact detonate in your brain for a minute. Your daughter gets raped, and what you want to do is kill her. What are the chances that represents a peak of human flourishing? Now, to say this is not to say that we have got the perfect solution in our own society. I mean, for instance, this is what it's like to go to a newsstand almost anywhere in the civilized world. Now, granted, for many men, it may require a degree in philosophy to see something wrong with these images. But if we are in a reflective mood, we can ask, is this the perfect expression of psychological balance with respect to variables like youth and beauty in women's bodies? I mean, is this the optimal environment in which to raise our children? Probably not. Okay, so perhaps there's some place on the spectrum between these two extremes that represents a place of better balance. Okay?
Makes sense to me. And that doesn't mean that doing good or finding moral or ethical answers is easy, or that it isn't complicated at times. But I think we can do it without believing in a deity. Now, obviously, I think ethics is a complicated subject that would take many, many videos to cover adequately. But I think that the varied ways throughout history that we have come to clashing conclusions shows you that there isn't an entity that just decreed a right answer. I think we reasoned our ways to those outcomes, many of them based on faulty or inaccurate information or self-interest.
If there is no external standard outside of ourselves, how can you have anything other than just personal preference? You see, the problem you have is if there is no God, even talk of goodness just collapses to personal preference.
You make it sound like people just wake up in the morning and flip a coin to decide whether they should kick a puppy that day. Why would there need to be a God to consistently construct a moral framework?
You decide that helping animals or helping the poor is a good thing, while standing over here is somebody else who decides they want to be monstrous and unjust and cruel and unfair. What makes your way right and their way wrong?
You would have to make the case for why your way will lead to a better society and create the least amount of suffering. We also construct societies where these discussions take place constantly, and we try our best to reason our way to the best possible outcome. Sometimes we are relatively successful, and sometimes we fail miserably.
Or to put it another way, if there is no God, all we have are a set of actions and deeds and some labels marked good and evil, and each of us gets to run around putting the good and evil labels on the things that we like or don't like. But what's to prevent us simply switching the labels around?
We do that constantly. We do it within our own societies, and we do it around the world. It wasn't very long ago that keeping slaves was considered a good thing. We've had societies that thought being a human sacrifice to appease the gods was one of the greatest acts someone could perform. We have countries where cutting off limbs for stealing is just, and where caning someone for standing too close to their boyfriend is a legal thing to do. We are constantly changing those labels and trying our best as a species to find the best answers to those moral questions.
You decide that helping kittens out of trees is a good thing. I decide that clubbing them to death and making rugs out of their hides is a good thing.
People have made rugs out of cat hides and not lost a wink of sleep as a consequence. I'm not sure if they were all kittens, but I'm sure there's somebody out there at some point in time that has done that.
How do we determine who's right and who's wrong? We have no way if there is no God.
We do have a way. We can use language, reasoning, and empathy.
So to even use the language of good and bad and right and wrong actually implies an external referent point.
Not really, but that's why I prefer the term ethical and unethical. I'm going to jump ahead a bit to his next point.
You see, what strikes me when you look at the teaching and the life and the ministry of Jesus of Nazareth, time and time again, the people he argues with, the people he guns for, are not the immoral people who don't believe in God. It's the religious leaders who do believe in God. And time again, he calls them out for their hypocrisy, and he calls them out for doing good deeds and following the religious law for all the wrong reasons. Because you can be a moral person because it gains you reputation. You can be a moral person to show off. You can be a moral person because you can use morality as a stick to beat others with and a way to gain power and influence. And Jesus cut through all of it.
Holy shit. Jesus was the first anti-SJW? Wait, oh my god, how did I get my SJW gear on? Let me change.
The bad news of Christianity is that we are such bad people that Jesus had to die for us. But the good news of Christianity is that God loves us so much that Jesus was glad to die for us. That's the radical claim about God and goodness that is unique to the Christian faith.
Yeah, I know, we're human garbage. I'm not into self-loathing right now. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Take care and cheers.